Hello, Motorrad World fans, and welcome to another episode of Talking MotoGP. You'll see this time around, it's just myself. Unfortunately, my normal co-host Paul is not able to join this evening, but he'll definitely be back for the next round after the Brazil race. I'm wearing headphones, so just let me know if you can hear me, first of all, because I have my son playing some Fortnite in the background, so I'm just trying this out. So anyone in the comments, if there's any problem with my audio or visual, just let me know. But for now, everything seems good. Yvonne Pretorius, as always. Hi, Rob and Paul. It's only me tonight, but anyway, we will have Paul back soon. So every single one of you are going to be my co-host tonight. That's how it's going to work. Unfortunately, Paul's not here, but each and every one of you are going to be my co-host. You'll also notice that we have a new sponsor for the show now. It's powered by Autocycle Center, which is the proud importer and distributor of HJC helmets into South Africa. And they have a brand new shipment of HJC helmets coming any day now. So get down to your local powered by Autocycle Center dealer and have a look at the brilliant range of helmets that HJC have. You would have noticed on the weekend in MotoGP and as well as World Superbike a couple of weekends ago, a lot of riders having to wear alternative helmets with no branding on because of the new FIM homologations and all those kind of things. Not HJC riders. HJC had their helmet done, sorted. So when you buy an HJC helmet, you know it's top of the range, top quality, FIM approved, especially the Alpha One, which is the same helmet that the likes of our very own superhero, Mr. Brad Binder, does wear. So big thank you to the whole team from Powered by Autocycle Center for supporting us in the show and sponsoring the show. So it looks like the microphone and everything's working fine. If you do hear my son in the background screaming and shouting and shooting people on his game, just let me know and I can tell him to turn it down. But I hope the headphones and the microphone here are doing well. Can everyone hear me fine? Just give me a message. Luca, Michael, Daryl, someone just give me a thumbs up or something that you can all hear me. But Yvonne Pretorius is pole position in tonight's comments. It's been a long 3 months. Wow. Moto2, my two favorite, David Alonso and Sergio Garcia, I nearly had a heart attack. Lucky they are both okay. It was a crazy Moto2 race, Yvonne. And David Alonso, as what a supreme talent he is, but he does seem to be, like just at the heart of these big crashes. He never just has a small crash, that guy. It's always one of the big crashes. And I do worry that he's going to, his career is going to go that path of like a Danny Pedrosa, who's like the nearly man. Got all the talent in the world, but big crashes and injuries kind of hold you back. So thankfully, he walked away from that. It does look like the biggest loser out of the whole Moto2 scenario that happened on the weekend was Luca Lanetta, who's having some kind of surgery on a leg injury. So, just great to see that there were no main, big casualties after what was a very chaotic weekend. Such tough conditions out in Thailand. Khafi Low in second place. Well, I'm sure most are happy about Simon's call on that block pass Marc did on Pedro. No contact, no nothing. Perfect, good pass. Penalty definitely not worth that. So as Khafi, we are one of the many points that we're going to discuss tonight. Let me just have it here. Sound is good. Thank you, Daryl Holmes. Thank you, everyone, for confirming that. Let me just go through a couple of the comments here. Brian Ritchie. Brian, how are you? Third place, man, in our comments there. Great to always have you with us. That was an interesting episode that both Alex and Mark did not see the finish line on Sunday. Yeah, one of the topics again, Ducati struggles at the track. I know people are kind of going, Aprilia is the new top and Ducati, are kind of lost. And oh no, I don't think it's as big as it's hyped up to be. I think it was. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. So keep those comments coming in. As I said, because I don't have Paul as my co-host tonight, really am relying on all of you to be my co-host. So get those questions in. I'll definitely try and keep up with the comments as we kind of dive into the results from the weekend. I just want to get the results up on my phone. Sorry, it's been one of those days. So let's get the results. There we go. Starting off with Moto 3 quickly, just to touch on our other superstar, South African superstar that we have racing in the Moto 3 Championship. It was a tough weekend for him. He came out and said that it was one of the toughest weekends he's ever had. Didn't feel like he stepped up to the plate like he should have. Listen, it was clear for all of us to see that he really did battle. He was always kind of down the lower pecking order and just couldn't gel with the track, couldn't get the setup that he wanted, just couldn't find that comfort zone. And it takes, this is the kind of challenges you're going to go through as you progress in your career. And I take my hat off to Riche for coming onto social media and kind of taking the blame on and saying, I wasn't good enough. I've got to step it up, and I've got to be better. It's normally the easy route for riders to take and say, oh, the team and the bike and whatever. Riche came out and said, there's work to be done there. So I credit him for that. It was a tough weekend. And like what I said on his social media post, it's the tough weekends where you learn the most. It's the losses where you learn the most. So keep your head up, Riche. Keep working at it. You've got what it takes. We're all behind you. And let's just reset and get to Brazil. Brazil's a complete clean slate for everyone. And let's go there and try and do something. So don't be too hard on yourself. But at the same time, it is good to look at yourself and try and find where you can perform and where you can step up the level. Having said that, I know Riche's been doing a lot of training in the background. He's very good with his social media, showing us all that. So keep up the good work, Riche, and we're behind you all the way. Some comments here. Paolo Cecchetti, evening all, great start of the 2026 season. Looking forward to the discussion. Yeah, lots to talk about, and it was an entertaining start to the season with so many spanners thrown in the works and so many talking points on and off track that we're going to try and dive into tonight. So please, let's try not miss anything. Get those comments in. James Thompson, Deem Lemon. Hi, everyone. Amazing weekend, and I missed it all. I just caught up with the main race this evening. So, Dean, good that you've caught up with it. So now we can talk about it. Wayne Taylor, how you doing, Wayne? Hope you're well. El Camino, Grant Farrows, hearing you, Rob. Thank you, Grant, for that. So good that you can all hear me. Daryl Holmes, Michael Maggot, Ian Luca Jefferson, Stiggy Wiggy. Good evening, Moto fans. Hello, Stiggy Wiggy. I hope you are well. Sebastian Trump 6811, Grant Gibson, Francois Retief, Robert Mackey, loud and clear. There we go, Robert. Thank you. I think you're traveling home from work or something, my Scottish mate. So great that you could join. Great that the sound's all loud and clear. That's brilliant. Van Erasmus, do we have an MRW fantasy group on MotoGP app? Unfortunately, we don't, Vanna. I just don't think we have the bandwidth to do it at the moment. My brother is just flat out managing all that is Motor Rider World pretty much by himself back in South Africa. And then, busy with my full-time duties, but it would be nice to do something like that. We just wouldn't be able to manage it at the moment. But if you have one and you would like other people to connect, drop it in the comments here. And it's always great to get people connecting with each other. This is a post from my brother. Thank you for tuning in. Proudly brought to you by HJC Helmets, powered by Autocycle Center. You can see the website there. They really have been a big supporter of Motor Rider World since day one. So please, if you're in the market for a new helmet, don't look any further than HJC Helmets. They've got a great range of helmets. As I said, the R for one is MotoGP FIM approved. The HJC riders didn't have to wear other helmets with no logos. HJC, you know what quality you're getting there. So it's brilliant. Not only Ducati, but Pecco struggles in the race. Again, Robert Mackey. Yeah, so we've got a lot to talk about. John Fernandez, will we be able to watch Daz racing this year? So, John, you would have seen Motor Rider World. My brother reached out to the Warhorse Racing Ducati team over in the States, got some pictures of Darren, who's at a Daytona 200, but will be racing Daytona 200 this weekend for the first time over in the States. So look forward to seeing that. I believe it will be, as all the Moto America races, they're shown live on YouTube. The coverage is very good. I know my brother stays on top of that, and he reports on it after each and every race on our social media channels and in the digital magazine every month. So yes, we'll definitely be seeing not only Darren Binder in the Supersport Moto America Championship, but also Matthew Skoltz, current Supersport Moto America champion, stepping up to the 1000cc class once again. Cam Peterson on a Ducati in the 1000cc class again this year. And his name's just jumped out of my head now. Youngster from PE, very good rider. My brother will put up, or someone will put it up now. He raced a Yamaha R7, and he's raced in the hooligan class. His name slips me, but we've got a very strong South African presence in the Moto America. Wayne Taylor, Rob, what happened to our Brad podcast? Wayne, so I did get hold of Brad, and Brad was like, yes, uncle, sounds fantastic. I definitely need to do it. Let's make it happen. And then just time has just escaped us, and I have been on top of him. Obviously the race weekend, that's where his focus is, but I will keep trying to make that happen, as with Darren, as many of the South African riders as I possibly can. But they, I love them to pieces, but there does come a point where you're tired of asking. So, it basically boils down to time. But I will keep pushing to make it happen, because we need to make it happen. Brian Ritchie, I saw from Sky Sports Germany and listened to their comments about the incident. There were two options that they were discussing: either drop one place or 3-second penalty, drop one place. We'll get into that. I think that's the perfect way to start. Okay, we'll get one going. Motor Rider World will have a fantasy group. Oh, that's great. Vanna Erasmus, thank you so much. That'll be brilliant. So keep a lookout for Vanna Erasmus. Vanna, let us know. We'll promote it on our channels and that as well. That's brilliant. Really appreciate it. We're such a great community, aren't we? That really do appreciate that, Vanna. My brother Dominic Doyle in Super Sport class. Dominic Doyle. Can't forget Dominic Doyle. Chris Steliano. I hope I said that right. Good evening, Rob and everyone. How you doing, Chris? Welcome to the chat. Dominic Doyle, thank you, Stiggy Wiggy. Robert Swart. Beep, I'm late. No, you're not. We haven't started the conversation yet, so let's get going with it. Rob, I heard that Keanu and his Arch Motorcycles are sponsoring Moto America races this year. I don't know if it's ARC. I know Keanu Reeves is involved somehow as a headline sponsor for Moto America, so the coverage and everything is going to be better. But yeah, it's great to have someone like him involved in motorcycle racing, in the sport that we love. So a couple of big talking points to get onto tonight. As a lot of people have said in the comments, it was a great way to start the season. It was action-packed. There's a lot going on, not only on track, but off track. Track conditions on Sunday were just epic. One of my mates, James Dent, was lucky enough to be at the Thailand races this weekend, and he said it was like 41-degree air temperature. You couldn't walk, you couldn't stand in one place for too long on the tar. Your shoes would stick to the tar, and brutal conditions. And we saw it with tires and everything going on with the riders. So it really was brutal for all the riders, Moto3, Moto2, and MotoGP. But having a look at the MotoGP, let's start with the Pedro Acosta and Marquez sprint race incident, get it out of the way, and then we can kind of just go through the riders, where they finished, and pick them apart. So straight after the race, I was working at the Lyon show in France, and I was watching it kind of behind closed doors, and I watched the incident unfold. And I immediately put a post on my Facebook page saying, well done, Pedro. It was great to see him sticking the fight to Marc Marquez, which is what we've needed. Marc Marquez needs to be challenged. You need to fight fire with Marc Marquez. And Pedro Acosta looks like he stepped up to the plate, and he's going to do that this year. I'm excited for that. They are going to potentially be teammates next year. It looks like almost a certain deal that Pedro Acosta will be with Marc Marquez next year, unless things could still change with Marquez's injuries and Pedro. Things could still change, but it looks like it's going that way. The first comment I would like to make is how well both riders handled it. I think the sportsmanship shown there was good. There wasn't a Pedro Acosta throwing his toys out, shaking his head, and both riders afterwards respected handshakes and everything. So well done to both riders on how they handled that. I really do think it was a great show of sportsmanship and professionalism. That is the first thing I'd like to get out there. I'm going to give my point of view here, and please, everyone, as I said, you're all co-hosts tonight. I've obviously seen a lot of comments on that post that I did on Facebook, and there definitely was a 50, maybe a 60-40 split on the decision, which is what it's about, each to their own. Bugs 272. Here's the first. I think it was a fair pass. Marc didn't leave track limits. A standard block pass. Pedro turned into Marc. It was so tame and a poor penalty. Daryl Holmes. I thought Pirelli was a tight player. Okay, we'll talk about it, Daryl. So yeah, that's for next year onwards. Penalty was a bit harsh. Yes, late dive, but racing for the win getting a bit soft. So here's my side, and I'm going to reference some of the riders' comments after the incident. DJ Antonio, we must punch each other. We must smash fairings. We must throw elbows. But off track, that's where we have to think about the safety of riders. Now, we all know what he's saying there, especially if you've done some form of racing in your life, you'll really understand where those comments come from. Raul Fernandez, MotoGP is heading the wrong way. Obviously the way of Formula One is no passing, stay in line, and if you're going to pass, do it nice, neatly, and cleanly. It's never going to happen. These guys are on the limit every single corner. You're going to get these kind of incidences where you've got to create a gap, and that's kind of what Mark did. Okay, I've got 16 million photos. My take on it is, since racing has started, especially the modern era, part of the arsenal of racecraft is block passing. I've done it. I did it to my brother at the Red Star 24 hour, the one year when we were both on Triumphs. There was no gap. He had a bit more pace than me. I was coming through the field and I invented a gap and I shoved it on the inside. I parked my Triumph there and there was nothing he could do. Classic block pass. But it's been part of motorcycle racing, racecraft for many years. Valentino Rossi was perfect at it. When Rossi did it to Casey Stoner at Laguna Seca, to Jorge Lorenzo at Jerez, we applauded it. We went, nothing wrong. It's racing. Yes. Now it's Marc Marquez, and it's no. He came from way back. You can't do that. You can't run people off the track. No. And that's where I have a problem with it. Simon Crafar is the perfect man for the job, and has done a fantastic job, and I have no doubt he will continue to do a fantastic job. And I am a huge ambassador of him staying there. But he got this one wrong. I understand how he broke it down. Mark came from further back. It happens. Pedro Acosta's reaction tells you all you need to know. He didn't shake his head when the move happened. He didn't do anything after the race. He said, I would have done the same thing. Over the line, he looked and he was like, why is Mark giving me the position? It's called racing. Let them race. Trust the riders. Step in when you need to be stepped in. Franco Morbidelli is a perfect example. He needs to be managed because he's made some stupid decisions in the past. And there are decisions where race direction really have to step in and be ruthless. This was not one of them. This was a classic block pass racing move. And if we're going to start analyzing every move like that throughout the season, purely because Pedro Acosta was forced off track, Ben Spies put it perfectly. And I don't know who's running the MotoGP supporters SA group, or I do know, but he doesn't want to hear my side, unfortunately, because he knows I'm right and he's wrong, just because he hates Marc Marquez and he refuses to see anything Marc Marquez, which is a bit weird for a so-called pundit to hate a rider so much that he can't share his views. But anyway, I posted it on MotoGP supporters page on Sunday, but my post was not accepted. Funny, huh? Ben Spies, just wasted my morning watching a great race that MotoGP ruined in the end. Ben Spies. Now, remembering that 90% of the riders have come out and said, it's not the way to do it. Just wasted my morning watching a MotoGP ruin race. Even Pedro didn't understand what was happening and said he didn't feel like the winner. Bravo to the riders for putting on a great race. The point is, Pedro knew he was in hot and could have helped himself by not turning in. 2 times he did the same move, and if Mark turned in, they would have touched. Mark waited and undercut him. That was good, hard racing by both riders. Done. Okay. Olimoto, welcome, my friend. Hope you are well. When Rossi blocked past people like he did to Biaggi at Velcom in 2004, he didn't run them off track. Marquez came from so deep and ran so far off the apex that Acosta was pushed off track. Olimoto, and this is the argument, which I understand. I understand exactly what you're saying. Valentino Rossi, Jorge Lorenzo, Jerez. Valentino Rossi, Casey Stoner. And I loved it. I thought it was racing. Rossi didn't have the pace, so he had to invent things to win the race. And that's what racing's about. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It's what racing is about. You've got to invent lines sometime to pass. Marc Marquez went in. Yes, he went in and he could have turned in. He had the brake on, so he couldn't really turn, but he went in with the intention to not let Pedro cut back. As I said, it's part of the arsenal of racecraft. It's called a block pass. You watch motocross, they do it 10 times harder than that each and every single round. It's part of racecraft. It's got a title, the block pass. Can you imagine? Like I said, I loved Valentino Rossi because he was that never say die attitude. I loved Marco Simoncelli. That was what they are about. Can you imagine this rule? Marco Simoncelli wouldn't exist. Okay, it's a bad use of words, but he wouldn't have been allowed to race MotoGP, Marco Simoncelli, because he just would have been given penalties all the time. Rossi would have probably lost how many races because it's racing, and I understand that it's this Marc Marquez thing. It's Marc again. It's Marc, and forget that for one. We're looking at the bigger picture of racing, and I see it as a racing incident. I see it as a classic old school block pass, as Pedro and everyone else in that paddock kind of saw. I haven't seen anyone else come out and kind of explain it in any other way. Again, this is where I would have liked to have seen Simon Crayford come afterwards and say, right, this is why we made the decision, to give it a bit more clarity, and each to their own. Listen, I'm okay with both sides. I just don't want it to get to this point. Now, Mark is saying that this is the new MotoGP and we got to play by the rules. I don't want riders thinking like that. Moto 3 is the most entertaining because they bash and they kick and they headbutt and they do all those things. That's what we want to see. Now, if you're going to start slowly, it is the new MotoGP. We're going to see less and less last lap, last corner maneuvers. And I know there was contact. There's contact and then there's contact. I mean, they grazed each other. I mean, that's not contact. Do you know what I mean? It's anyway. That's just my thought, my way on it. I see a lot of people. Rob, have you seen the comments from Aprilia on that post? Johnny, no, I haven't actually. I haven't at all. So I don't know if you can post some of them in here and we can have a look. Bugs 272, in Simon's credit, yes, he got it wrong, but he did call it early. I agree with you. That was one good thing that happened is how quickly it was called, that Marc could at least react to it and not get the 3-second penalty for crossing the line and then a whole can of worms there, which was refreshing because the results didn't change after the riders crossed the finish line. Credit to him for that. Bugs, I completely agree with you. You know, there's another way of looking at this, and when I was kind of processing it all after the Sunday race and just breaking it down, I was thinking, you know, is MotoGP getting to that political route of they were sitting there in the room with Simon and they kind of tapped Simon on the shoulder and went, listen, make this call because the headline, we need this headline. We want this headline of Marc gets this penalty and Pedro wins, and the headline of Marc winning the sprint race. Yay, Marc wins again. Yay. What's a better headline, that or Pedro Costa wins his first sprint race and KTM lead the championship for the first time in MotoGP history? I'm not saying at all that that's what happened, but I'm saying it feels like MotoGP could be like that, where there's this director, we've all watched enough movies where this director sitting in there and just tapping him on the shoulder and go, right, give that penalty because the headline is, it's going to blow up. Bad news is better than good news. It sells more headlines and more papers. So anyway, there's ways to pull it apart. Simon had no time. He called it like in 30 seconds. Kudos. Yeah. So a touch, not a barge, rubbing racing. No, yeah, Robert, I agree with you. I know people say there was contact and there was, but for me, there's two different. There's contact and then there's a graze. That was a graze, and like I said, credit to both riders. I don't believe this decision will in any way influence Marc or Pedro's mindset going forward. They are two aggressive, incredible racing animals and will keep doing this, which is great. I hope you're right, Wayne. Marc's kind of comments, I know he's playing the game and had his media hat on more likely than anything, but it's something for the riders to think about, in that situation. Now, again, if it happened on Sunday, does Marc make the move? I don't think he does. And then it's like, well, okay, follow the leader, Formula One style. So I don't know. Listen, we could go on about this for days. I would love to hear opinions if Morbidelli had done it to Binder. Oh, jeez, yeah, Olimoto, can you? Yeah, don't go there. I think we would have just had a whole show called Talking Morbidelli and Binder. Listen, as I said, there's each to their own. Agree to disagree. It's just, I think the big black cloud above the whole thing and the elephant in the room with the whole thing is that we as MotoGP fans don't want to see it go down that line of taking too much away from the riders, taking too much decision making away from the riders. Let them race. As DG says, we're on the track. Let's bash Albers, because we've been doing it for years and years and years and years and years. And giving the riders, that bit of string, and then having to pull it at the right moments. This wasn't a moment to pull it for me. So, but having said that, like, nothing personally against Simon. He's the man for the job. He handled the decision rightly. I just hope it was his decision and not MotoGP's. That's what, again, where I would like to see Simon Crayford come out afterwards for a 2-minute interview and say, right, this is how we broke down the decision. This is how we based the decision. That would give a bit more clarity and would probably put a sock in someone like my mouth and keep me quiet. But the moment, it just gives us all free reign to kind of lambaste and just go on about it because there's no clarity. Okay, moving on from that. Bastianini made a much harder pass on Martin a few seasons back. Peter Garmini. So, but there was the same incident with Alex Marquez and DJ Antonio in the sprint race. The only argument there was Alex Marquez had to pick up to avoid hitting the back of Ralph Fernandez or Iger. I can't remember. But my argument there is Alex Marquez was going way too fast into that corner. He had to pick up because he was going too fast. Otherwise, he would hit the back. So then he ran a rider off track. So why was there no penalty involved there? I don't know. People say, yeah, but he had to swerve to not hit the back. Yeah, but he was going to hit the back of him because he was going into the corner way too fast. Now, the argument with Mark is that he went into the corner way too fast and he pushed Pedro wide. Penalty. Well, Alex Marquez went into the corner too fast and had to pick up and took DJ Antonio wide. So it's just a weird thing. Ian Luca Jefferson, yes, we've got a lot to talk about in terms of who's going where. We'll do that right at the end of the show. Let's get through some of the other talking points. We've put that one to bed. Ollie Moto, let's have a look here. I don't think it's a case of a black or white, but Marquez knew what he was doing and calculated the timing of it, as he knew Acosta would struggle to come back. It wasn't dangerous. I fully agree with you, Ollie Moto. Mark knew exactly what he was doing there. And as you said, I've done that exact move many times. The only one I really know off the top of my head is the one I did to my brother, because my mom's got a picture of it in her house. The photographer captured it perfectly, where I just went, there's no gap. I'm making a gap. I let go of the brakes. I went in, I back brake, first gear, stopped the bike. My brother was trying to turn in. I'm saying, you're not turning in. You're not turning in. I'll let you know when you want to turn in. And off I went. So Mark knew exactly what, but as I said, it's part of the arsenal of racecraft. We all have it. We've all used it. The greatest in the world have used it. Valentino Rossi's used it. Kevin Schwantz has used it. It's there. Don't take it away from them. Do not take it away from them. Jonathan, Tommy Tucker, Mark, all the Mark Marquez fans and their dogs crying. Simon is an ex-racer and probably the most fair of them all so far. Mark would never have made the apex, and the rules have been slightly updated this season, probably because of Morbidelli and other incidents. Jonathan, exactly, like in the exact same way that I said it's Mark Marquez haters, going against him. I hear what you're saying. Mark Marquez fans will always defend him. That's where the agree to disagree is going to happen. And I agree with you. Simon is the perfect man for the job. He absolutely is. Mark made the corner. He didn't make the apex. I understand that, but he made the corner. He did not run off. The fact that he had Pedro on his outside, as Ben Spies said, that's just part of the racing. That's why it's called a block pass. It's been in racing for years and years. But as you say, Jonathan, the new rule book, that move is illegal. So you can't argue with it. And as Mark said after the race, this is the new MotoGP and we have to play by the rules. So in that way, absolutely, you're all right. As a genuine racing fan, I don't want that rule in racing. I want race direction to get involved when they need to get involved, when it's a real, like some previous Morbidelli incidences or those kind of things. That's where I want them to get involved, not passes like this. For me, that's racing, and it has been racing for many, many, many years. But very valid comment, Jonathan. Thank you so much for putting that. Muhammad, Alex Marquez came in too hot and he got upset, didn't take responsibility. He was at fault. I fully agree. Again, people say, yeah, but he had to avoid the rider ahead of him. He had to avoid the rider ahead of him because he went in way too fast. The biggest loser there was DJ Antonio. No penalty, Alex Marquez. So that's kind of, and again, if Simon Crayford came out and said, this is why we didn't give Alex Marquez a penalty, this is why we gave Mark, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So Olimoto, that's the bottom line. Mark broke the rules. Yeah. In that statement there, the bottom line is Mark broke the new MotoGP rules and the punishment, got the correct punishment. You're absolutely right. I just don't want that rule there. End of story. Let's get on to the more positive side from the weekend, and we have to talk Aprilia. We have got to talk Aprilia. What a dominant weekend! I mean, Bezzecchi, you can't. I feel for, because he could have had the perfect weekend. First Aprilia rider to ever win 3 races in a row. Another pole position. Aprilia had all 3 riders on the podium at one point when Jorge Martin passed Marc in the main race on Sunday. The Aprilia's just looked so good. And cast your mind back a couple of years, and this is where massive credit. I know we harp on about Bezzecchi and the work that he's done. Aprilia, this tiny little company in Italy, have got, we need to hold them up on a pedestal. A few years ago, their riders weren't even finishing half distance of those races. Alicia Spargo and Maverick Vinales. Remember, the bikes were overheating. There was too much heat. They couldn't last. They pulled in. They couldn't last. This is not an Aprilia track. This is not a track that you've gone to and said, right, Aprilia have dominated here before. They're going to do well. Aprilia have found something. There's no doubt about that. Bezzecchi has stepped up that whole operation. I don't know if you all noticed it, and comment, please, if you did. Bezzecchi's mannerism in the pit box and the way he walks around now. There's this mature, confident rider there now. There's this kid who's turned into a man, looking at this going, I'm going for this MotoGP championship this year. I am going for it. And oh man, I'm so excited. I think it's pretty clear that he's going to be the biggest challenger to Marc. We'll get on to Marc just now in Ducati. This was certainly a blip, a glitch in the matrix, if you will. But Bezzecchi and Aprilia were so good. So good. That was such a dominant win on Sunday from Marco Bezzecchi, especially to come back from, the crash that he had in qualifying, in the sprint race, which hurt him. Bezzecchi's never been the best starter. He's always taken a few laps to get going, and all that's gone now. Bezzecchi is just, I just see a different Bezzecchi. I see an Aprilia. I love how Massimo Rivola or Ravioli, I never know how to say his name, from Aprilia, they're just so confident. Their chests are out and they are just ready for this battle. And it's great to see. It's exactly what we needed for MotoGP. We don't need Aprilia's running away and winning races by 5 seconds every weekend, but massive kudos to Bezzecchi and Aprilia. I really think they've done a fantastic job. As I said, from a couple of years ago, with overheating bikes, riders punching tanks and doing all kinds of things, to a dominant weekend. I mean, Jorge Martin, looked good. Was right in the mix. Got a couple of good race results under his belt. This is a man who missed, a lot of preseason testing with injury as well. Raul Fernandez is a different rider on this Aprilia. Credit to him, because preseason testing wasn't the greatest for him, and he turned it around and he found something. I honestly didn't think we'd be talking about Raul Fernandez as a MotoGP podium contender week in, week out. I still have my doubts. I think the Aprilia worked exceptionally well this weekend, and the Ducati's failures maybe highlighted Aprilia's dominance as well. So there's going to be harder races coming for the likes of Bezzecchi and Martin and Acosta and Raul Fernandez, but you can't take anything away from them. They were absolutely sublime this weekend. Rob Swart, Bez has only started winning all of these races once he took out his competition in Marc. Laugh out loud. Jokes, but it's true. I like Bez though. Happy for him and Aprilia. Oli Moto, Bezzecchi would have been untouchable in the sprint if he didn't bin it. 100% agree with that. A cut above. The Aprilia looked like the best bike, but how much is that apparent step also due to Ducati not getting it right? And that's the point I'm trying to make here. Even Massimo from Aprilia came out and said it wasn't Ducati failing. It was Aprilia kind of exceeding. But Marc also, his comments coming out afterwards saying it was just a bad weekend for Ducati. And we've seen it in the Indonesian race last year and maybe the year before, where Ducati, if they have this change of tire, so there was this new harder carcass tire for the race on Sunday to manage the conditions, the Ducatis do battle. And we did see the Ducatis miles off the pace. All through testing, it's been Ducati with Aprilia there, take nothing away from them. But I didn't see this kind of, Ducati downfall coming. Marc was in it in the sprint, as Oli Moto says. I think Bezzecchi would have walked it, but Marc was in the run and would have been on the podium. I think Marc would have been on the podium in the main race had the incident not happened there. We'll get onto that now. So not all doom and gloom for Ducati, and we can't we can't now just, Aprilia is the new best bike and Ducati are over. And I don't think it's as clear cut as that. But as Olimoto said, I think it was Aprilia were really good, no doubt about it. But Ducati also weren't at their best, which made Aprilia look even better than they are, if you know how I'm trying to break that down. Daryl Holm, Bez is going to be the thorn in Marc Marquez's side this year. I hope so. And like I said, I'm looking at a Bez in the pits that looks more mature and more confident. And I hope that mentality can come out when it matters most. Mark is able to mentally beat riders when it matters most, and other riders fail. That's why I loved Acosta on the weekend, just fighting fire with fire. Mark was not going to bully Pedro Acosta, and it was great to see. It was absolutely brilliant to see. So it's in that kind of dogfight where it's easy for a best to get out front and run away with a win. Not easy, of course. It's never, nothing's easy. But it's when you're in a dogfight with Marc Marquez is where Mark generally comes out on top. He didn't this weekend with Pedro Acosta. But there's going to be races where Bez is going to have to prove that he can come out on top in those battles. And I think when I really truly see that, then we can really start talking about title contention. And that, for me, Mark is still the favorite because he's got that in his arsenal of attack. But take nothing away from Bez. I think it's coming. Wayne Taylor, Bez is looking good and crazy fast, but I still see him getting a little fragile if he has a few bad weekends. Kind of exactly my point. We've seen Bezzecchi at his strongest, like this is fantastic, but there are those fragile, good word to use, Wayne Taylor, there are those fragile moments where Bez in the past seemed to just crawl in his cage. And this is what I'm saying. If he can come out with the same kind of confidence that he showed this weekend in those moments, it's going to be a great championship. Alex Follion, Bez made meters through some of the turns that Aprilia was smooth as silk and planted awesome to watch. Ducati was struggling in both races. Listen, we can't remember where Mark's coming from, the injury, and that Mark didn't look comfortable in those right-handers. He really didn't. That Ducati didn't look comfortable. The Ducati looked, like it was struggling with the rear tire, especially at full lean angle. The Aprilia was able to hold much tighter lines. The KTM, to be honest, was able to hold much tighter lines. You could see by that pass every time, Pedro Acosta was just able to hold it tight. Mark and the Ducatis would get on the gas and it would just push the bike wide. KTM and Aprilia just stayed on line. So again, I think a lot of it is down to Ducati's failings. They should have and will be better than what they did. Yeah. So yeah, let's see. Richard Hawkins, there's been talk of the manual arm control aero. Do you want to elaborate on that, Richard Hawkins? Sorry, my mind's overwhelmed. I'm not too sure what you're talking about there. Surely that technician that walked around filming the Ducati helped them, as they have improved big time since then. Dean Lemon, remember that, Joe, when that Aprilia guy was with his iPad walking around the Ducati. Francois Latif, as soon as they move away from the testing track and Brazil, we will know where everyone stands. Francois, good comment. Obviously, go to Brazil next at the end of the month. Clean slate for everyone. No MotoGP bike has been there. The VR46 Academy and some other riders have been there on production superbikes. So yeah, like I said, we saw it in the last couple of years at Indonesia or some of the tracks where Ducati, when they have to fit this certain hard carcass tire, really doesn't suit them, and they battle. And that was again apparent this weekend. So it's not all doom and gloom just yet. Mohammed, Aprilia made big steps. Bez is great spirit. No, not arrogant. He's enjoying his racing. Lovely comment. Love that. Sean Portman, they need to make a tuk-tuk race a regular thing. Love that tuk-tuk race. And what I loved about it is, so there's Jack Miller and Toprak, which, the Yamaha is a discussion in itself, but not relevant really on track with the results. Yamaha nowhere in that. But again, this is the marketing I talk about. How relevant did they make themselves? They stole that show. They stole the show. Everything was about them. Jack on the back, Toprak on the back, pulling wheelies, hanging out, going on two wheels or one wheel. And I mean, it's just the art of marketing. I love that, how we're not relevant in the race results, so let's make ourselves relevant in the tuk-tuk race. But it was really cool to see. I loved the Aprilia guys just cutting the track, and I love that kind of thing. It was great to see that like human side of the MotoGP riders, if you know what I mean. Yeah, and I agree. It will be nice to see more of that. I must take my hat off to KTM as well, because I like this debrief that the riders are doing after. Brad did a couple of debriefs, where he's holding an iPhone and he says, "Yeah, the practice was good," and it gives us a little bit more insight into the race weekend. So, like that. Still want more, especially from Brad and Darren on social media. Although we, as I said in previous shows, we only have ourselves to blame for the lack of social media we get from the boys, because they've been lambasted so much. But hopefully we'll get a bit more. But yeah, I said, you know, there's a lot to worry about MotoGP. I mean, we could talk about the Phillip Island discussion all day long. I'll touch upon that quickly. No Phillip Island. Looks like it's going to this Adelaide circuit racing, which I can't see that happen. You cannot put MotoGP bikes on a circuit, on a street circuit. We talk about safety. Look what happened to Mark there. Ran off and a curb blew his tire. That could have ended disastrously. Now, what happens if there was a wall 10 meters closer? Mark would have been in a wall, And what do you do with a street circuit? Move a building? I don't understand. Anyway, and Phillip Island, it's, motorcycle racing, World Superbikes, MotoGP doesn't exist without Phillip Island. I know it's a political decision, and understand what FIM are saying is, we presented Phillip Island, you've got to do this, and they kept overlooking it, and now they're putting their foot down. So, I understand there's two sides to the story, but you just don't want this political side to come in and ruin the sport. So anyway, my point being that this weekend I saw a lot of good things come out, the tuk-tuk race, the more kind of personal media stuff and that. But then there's the downside of this Liberty takeover, which is like the Phillip Island conversation and street circuits, and that are all still question marks. So yeah, it's going to be a long, entertaining season with lots of factors coming out. Mark Lloyd, Mark, how are you doing, my friend? Hope you are well. Big part of the team, Mark, there. Well done to you and the whole team. Much better race weekend. Really, really good start. We'll touch upon some of the other riders just Robert Mackey, Ducati are often slow out of the blocks and can take a few races to get bikes dialed in. Yeah, as I said, I don't think it's doom and gloom as much as we're thinking. Robert Swart, Silverstone, they were terrible last year. Remember that. Even Tardozzi said it's the same bike as the rest, yet bike was different. Andre Feldman, Brad's totally killing it with the confidence vibes. Again, just elaborate on that. I'm not too sure what you mean by that. Mark is still looking weak in his shoulder. Bugs, I saw that. Yeah, the right-handers he really couldn't get that bike turned. And that's why you've got to take into consideration, this is a guy that didn't ride a MotoGP bike for 4 months, climbed into the test and went fast, which that's just a Mark statement. But yeah, that many laps around, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday around in those kind of conditions at a track like that, they got to hurt and they got to take their toll, and they certainly did. Olimoto, I really hope this weekend was a sign that this season will be close and open rather than easy. Title here was for Marquez. Would love to see Acosta and Bez win it, but except Mark will. Olimoto, I do think it's going to be. I really do. Mark's another year older, a bit more of an injury. There's another percent off Mark, if you know what I mean, in the mind, and that he's still got that killer instinct. He's still going to be the man to beat, as he proved this weekend, even when the bike wasn't at his strongest and he wasn't at his strongest, he was still able to compete. So he's definitely the man. Pedro's the name. And I said, Bezzecchi's got to still prove that one factor to me is, can he fight fire with Mark? Pedro Costa's proved that. Pedro Costa's biggest handicap is going to be machinery. That we are going to go to races where the KTM is going to battle a lot more. But yeah, it's a sign of good things to come, and long may it continue this way. Vanny Erasmus, there's no way that Mark is going to accept this amid Ducati is not Honda doing zip. They will be back quick and fast. Agree. Ducati will be back. Jonathan, Aprilia better because Ducati not getting it right is the same as saying that all other manufacturers are better because Yamaha or Honda couldn't get it right over a couple of seasons now. All I really know is I want more of those sort of races. You don't know where to look. Jonathan, fully agree. And I'm not saying Aprilia only shone because we're not saying Aprilia only shone because of Ducati's failings. Say Ducati weren't the normal Ducati challengers. So Bezzecchi won the race by 5.5 seconds or whatever it was, and slightly comfortably. It would have been a different race if he was pushed by an Alex, a Mark, maybe a Digi thrown in the mix, a Pecco thrown in the mix, which is going to come later in. But as you said, take nothing away from Aprilia. They deserve, oh man, for the tiny company and the struggles that they've come through. I just cast my mind back to, and I remember it clear as day, as Elation Maverick pulling in the pits with overheating bikes, just too much heat coming, burning on their legs, and they couldn't finish that race. And it was like, you know, that's it. Aprilia can't go racing in the likes of Thailand or Indonesia because it's too hot. And here they're dominating race weekends with Martin right up there, Fernandez on the podium, Ayagura was strong. So yeah, it's a good sign. John Kutsia, too many riders settle for top 5 rather than push for a win. Last year, I noticed that Bez and even Martin looked different this year. Good comment to make. Like you said, I think that confidence barrier has been broken now. And that's what I see with especially with Bez. I see this rider sitting there going, right, I'm not going on this track now to hopefully compete and be fast. I'm going on this track to win races. And I'm going on this track to compete against Mark and go for a championship. So that's what I'm really enjoying seeing. Mickey Teal, good evening, Rob. Sorry we're late. Greetings from Liam and myself. Hello, Liam and Mickey. Thanks for joining. Always appreciate your support and tuning in. X and Martin cutting corners on the tuk-tuk. Yeah, Bez and Martin. Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. Alex Fullion being told to keep it toned down a bit was awesome. Love that. Okay, let me just go through some of the. Hello, Bobby Idle, Rudy Pile. How are you, Rudy? Hope you're well, my buddy. Hope you're selling loads of cars in Port Elizabeth. Street circus should never happen in MotoGP. Ridiculous idea that is entirely about monetary liberty. Will always put money first. Yeah, that's what I'm so worried about. Sunbet ZX10 Masters. Thank you for joining. Sunbet ZX10 Masters Championship in South Africa. Going to kick off soon. Can't wait to see that racing. Some of the best racing action in South Africa, by far the biggest and most longest standing motorcycle racing championship in South Africa. So well done to all those riders. Jake Dust, I think Ducati must be concerned about certain tracks, tire type and heat. This might also shorten their patience with Pecco. My biggest concern with Pecco, and we'll talk about it in depth later, is I think his mind's checked out. He's at Aprilia already. Acosta has the talent, but does he have the bike? That's absolutely right. Keith Buller, let's go. Cool. Let's move on then. So we've done Aprilia, great, fantastic, well done. Pedro Acosta, let's talk about him quickly. And KTM, fantastic race weekend for them, leading the championship. First time KTM have ever led a championship, a MotoGP World Championship. Pedro Acosta, it's something he's deserved. I mean, let's be honest. He's, Brad will always be our man, and we'll back him to the end. But even Brad came out and said Pedro's doing amazing things, and we have to close that gap. It's as simple as that. Michelle Lewis, hi. About time you are back. Hello, Michelle. Hope you're doing well. And it is but about time we're back, and we are back. Sorry for not being back earlier. Yeah. So Brad's saying, we've got to close the gap. Pedro is the benchmark when it comes to KTM, and he's deserved it for so long. Last year he got the most podiums for KTM. He was the highest KTM finisher. He's deserved the MotoGP win. Take nothing away from the likes of Fermin Aldeguer, Raul Fernandez, and that. I take my hat off to Pedro Acosta. It cannot be easy knowing that you are the better rider and watching these other riders on better machinery, get the plaudits and taking his wins. But Pedro Acosta was fantastic this weekend. He wasn't this crashing Pedro Acosta in the practices or anything. He kind of took his time, worked well with the team, and got his race simulations perfectly and his race set up perfectly. He managed the race perfectly. There were times where he went into, especially that last corner, and I thought, there's no ways you are stopping that motorcycle. You have got to crash. And he didn't. Brilliant. Well done, Pedro Acosta. I want to see this guy on the top step of the podium. He deserves it. It was great to see him with a gold medal in the sprint race, but we need him to do it on a Sunday race now. But what a way to start the year. 2 great results. Top of the championship, going to a track that again is a clean slate. It's brilliant. Well done, Pedro Acosta. It really was brilliant. Alex Fullion, Pedro to Ducati. Heard a few comments on TNT in the weekend. So Alex, it's not 100% confirmed, but from what I hear on the inside, it's a done deal. Things can change and have changed in MotoGP. But we'll touch upon the rider market right at the end of the show. But just touch on that comment. From what I hear, it's a done deal. Even Pedro, after the sprint race, going to the Ducati team and all high fives and stuff. I think Ducati, if that deal is done, I think Ducati are very happy that they've got Pedro on their side, because he's kind of going to be the perfect replacement for Marc, isn't he? Marc, let's be honest, what is Marc? Is Marc going to sign on for next year even? A lot of people talking that if he gets title number 10 this year, that's it. He's beaten the record and off he goes into the sunset with a somewhat healthy body, or does he carry on to the point where that body, is not so healthy anymore and something big happens? But anyway, Ducati looking long term, and Pedro Acosta, if they get that right, Pedro Acosta and Marc Marquez, goodness me. Wow, absolutely wow. But anyway, Acosta is absolutely brilliant. Olimoto, good comment to make. Acosta and Binder on the current KTM remind me of Marquez and Crutchlow when they were on the Honda. That was the third best bike on the grid. Carl couldn't do what Marc did, like Brad with Pedro. It is. Look, I mean, we'll talk about Brad while we're on the KTM subject. And yeah, it wasn't necessarily the podium fight or the top 5 fight that we want to see from Brad week in, week out. But it was a good, solid start to the season for me. If you look at some of the riders crashing, not getting points, if you look at the like of Vinales and Bastianini, who kind of scratching their heads, we'll talk about them. We'll talk about them straight after this while we're in the KTM conversation, because it is a talking point. But for me, Brad's got a new crew chief that's learning every single session with every single lap. I think he's one of the signings of the seasons. When you're talking in the background. Phil Marin, I think he's going to do wonders for Brad. I think he's going to challenge Brad. I'm hoping. I think that's what Brad maybe needs, is a bit of challenging. Is like, Brad, you've got to. This is what Pedro's doing. You're doing this. You got to try do this. Or we've got to go this. So I think that is that partnership is just going to evolve and get better, and so will the results in that. But for Brad to bring it home in both races, in the points, just get a good reference, get a good solid start to the season. It was good. It was good for him. But I understand what you're saying, Olimoto, and I think it is that way, and I think Brad will also look at it that way. Brad's comments do remind me very much of what Carl used to say in the past. Carl would shine at certain points on that Honda, and it was brilliant. And there were times where he couldn't make it work. And in those times where he couldn't make it work, he was like, I simply can't do what Marc can do. It's as easy as that. And Brad kind of out of this weekend had those same kind of sentiments. As what Pedro's doing is working clearly, and I need to work on making myself do what Pedro's doing. So, but I solid start to the weekend, and I think that exercise it's just gonna get better and better and better. Did you see Marc Marquez's choice of riders for next year? He put his brother and Acosta, Daryl. Yeah, I did see that, and I think it's a solid pick. Again, whatever Marc does and says, it's always going to have mind games. Didn't mention Aprilia because he doesn't want to give them that glory. But we all know that Aprilia is going to be there, and Bez is going to be there. As for Maverick going to replace Brad, well, after this weekend, I'm sure KTM are already thinking about their decision. I'm going to quickly touch upon Maverick Vinales because we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago after the testing. I've been very impressed with Maverick Vinales, teaming up with Jorge Lorenzo. Everything, the training and everything that he's been doing has been fantastic. But this is where Jorge Lorenzo is going to have his work cut out. Maverick Vinales has got the talent. We know he's fast on a motorcycle. He knows what to do on a motorcycle. He knows how to go fast. He knows how to win races. Maverick's biggest challenge is himself. On race weekends like this, where things don't go his way and he can't find an answer, Maverick shuts down. Meltdown, shutdown, just cannot compute, buffering. And that's what happened this weekend. Maverick couldn't find the answers and he switches off. So Lorenzo's biggest job is going to be, right, Maverick, yeah, it's not going your way, but this is how we've got to improve it. This is how we've got to work. It wasn't a great welcome to MotoGP for, what's his name, Gunther Steiner, the ex F1 boss, who's now the Tech 3 boss. both their riders just had very challenging weekends. Maverick, I was very surprised at Maverick, to be honest, because he is going to be in the factory team next year again, as I've heard. I worked at the Leon show this weekend in France, and on the KTM stand, it's always been a Brad Binder bike. Every single show, EICMA, wherever I've gone to, it's been a Brad Binder number 33 KTM bike on the stand. Wherever I've gone. This past weekend at the Leon show, there was a Maverick Vinales bike, number 12 KTM on the KTM stand. Read into it what you will, but I look at those kind of things and I go, with everything that's going on, it's just another little sign. So yeah, I think that is going to happen. I think the Brad to Tech 3 is gonna happen alongside Holgado. Again, we'll really dive into this towards the end of the show. But yeah, I was disappointed with Maverick because Maverick let himself down this weekend again with that attitude of it's not my fault, it's everyone else's fault, and he throws his toys out the cot. So that's where Lorenzo's going to have his work cut out. With Maverick and his Butti Lorenzo this weekend being nowhere, I can't believe they want to replace Brad with Maverick, Kevin Free. It is. There's going to be races where Maverick is going to switch on and he's going to be fast and he's going to be hard to beat. It is a tough one. And, I go back to the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago where, there's this marketing factor that's got to be thrown into the mix. Who's the more marketable rider, Maverick Vinales or Brad Binder? Maverick Vinales at the moment. He's got the Jorge Lorenzo story with him. He's got the Maverick Vinales, I'm Spanish and I'm Foss story with him. He's, the blue-eyed boy of Spanish racing at one stage. He was going to be the next best thing. So he's got a little bit more of that marketing to him where, again, this is, where I'd love to have the one-on-one chat with Brad and just say that, the marketing side needs to be stepped up a little bit more off track. I believe from Brad, just to give a little bit more relevance and backbone to his worth, because he does have a lot of worth as he proved this weekend. Brad's main goal for this season is obviously to go win races and challenge for the championship. We know that. Realistically, his goal has got to be second KTM. Challenge Pedro whenever opportunity you have, of course. But if he can just always be ahead of Bastianini and Vinales, that's first prize for Brad in every race weekend for me. Then the podiums and the wins and the challenging for top fives and all that is just extra bonuses. You've got to be minimum second KTM. So let's see. Yeah, it was a good weekend. As you say, Grand Forest. Yeah, Brad came from 11th to 6th. He got straight into Q2 for the first time, which is just so much better. He couldn't quite make it work in Q2. But again, your weekend's just starting on such a positive foot just by getting into that Q2. Did you see how they came in? The whole team was celebrating. It just lifts the whole team. Everyone's lifted, and it just sets up your whole weekend. And it was a good, solid foundation for Brad to go and get 2 good results and a couple of good points in the championship. So he's got to just keep doing that. Just keep getting into that Q2, keep being positive, and just keep working at it. Feel so sorry for James Thompson. Feel sorry for Toprak. Yeah, we'll get into Toprak just now because there's a lot to talk about there. Brad was so quick at the end of the race, almost caught Digi on the last lap. He was flying. Bodes well for the next race. Yeah, I think there was a lot of time management that had to go in that race from all the riders. And setup is a big thing when it comes to tire management. Did Brad manage it a bit too well and not give himself enough time at the end? You could argue that, but the main thing is he crossed the line and he finished it. If you look at Raul Fernandez, who was dropping massively towards the end, an extra couple of laps, and that could have been a whole different conversation. But a lot of positives from Brad's side, from KTM side, with Pedro and Brad doing well. Tech 3 is another conversation. And as I said, with Maverick Vinales, there's a lot of the mental side that's still needs to be. The race car, Maverick Vinales knows how to go fast on a motorbike. He knows how to turn in figures of eights, and that's just sharpness. That's great. The mental side is where Lorenzo is going to battle the most with this year. Paolo Cecchetti, there was something about Aprilia exploiting loophole in aero rules that other teams have yet to. Honestly, and this maybe was the comment that was mentioned earlier that I didn't know what you were talking about, but I've heard something about that where they're deploying this aero that was actually banned in F1. I haven't dived into into it enough. I haven't read enough about it, to be honest, to really know the intricacies of that. So if anyone has more info on that, please just post in the comments and I'll try and get onto it. Court, Daryl, yes, court, not coughed. Robert Swart. So KTM have always battled with this track, in my opinion. They cannot, well, the bugs they have, but a couple of years ago, Brad was fighting against Martin and Pecco for the win, which was an almighty fight. So KTM have just always been this inconsistent package. Every race weekend, you're just going, okay, well, what's going to happen? This weekend was good. They could go to Brazil and just tank it again, or they could carry on the momentum. It's just, you never know. They cannot get the rear hooked up with the funny rear Michelin tire. The heat and this weekend was big improvements for the bike. Bugs, well put. Yeah, like you said, they've always battled in the past with hot tracks, and certainly when these new carcass tires get introduced, KTM are normally the biggest losers in that, but they seem to manage it a lot better this weekend. So there are a lot of positives to take there from that. Olimoto, Vinales and Bastianini were a disaster this weekend. Vinales will never be a consistent rider. Bastianini must be looking over his shoulder for 2026. Who would sign him if he gets dropped? Olimoto, I fully agree with that. It does sound like Bastianini's best option is probably World Superbikes. That's one of the names. You can see where a lot of puzzles fit into pieces for next year. Bastianini is the one puzzle that you're kind of sitting there with going, where does this really fit? So, yeah, I agree with you on that. Maverick cannot be a lead rider in a factory team. Simple. He's not a team player or level-headed. It will never work. I agree with you, Wayne. He's proven that. And if KTM are putting all their resources and all their hopes on Maverick Vinales for next year and beyond, I agree with you. He's not the answer. He's absolutely not the answer. But who is the answer there? Pedro's going. There's no doubt about that. Who do they get as the lead rider in that team? They're not going to get a David Alonso. He's going to go to Ducati. Danny Holgado is a good signing into the Tech 3 team. It looks like alongside Brad. Again, it's another one of those puzzles. It's Alex Marquez. Alex Marquez is being touted, but again, we'll. There's a lot to talk about the rider market. We'll get onto that right at the end of the show. MotoGP is more popular in Spain than anywhere else, so it would be no surprise if KTM want to replace Acosta and Binder with Alex Marquez and Vinales. Again, the marketing side, you're absolutely right, Olimoto. Gunter might actually welcome the swap and prefer the gains in stability in his rider lineup. Agree with you. Brad needs to look at it this way. Alex Marquez is replacing Acosta, not him. That should leave him his spot available. If he keeps beating Vinales, then surely they should keep him. Agree with you, but again, the marketing side, Olimoto, I think, is what's really going to backfire there. Okay, a couple of really good comments going on there. You can all see it for yourself. Brad cannot go anywhere. Everything I own is in orange, even my dog. Lovely. Brensky, that's a great comment. Love it. Yeah, even the dog's orange. So, Brad, do you hear that? You cannot leave KTM because the man's orange. Ralph Fernandez, we've kind of touched upon there. Jorge Martin, we've touched upon. Ayagura, just brilliant. I mean, Aprilia first, third, fourth, and fifth. I mean, that's just well done, Aprilia. DJ Antonio, the best of the Ducatis in the main race, in sixth position. Obviously, we know what happened with Marc. We've kind of discussed that, hitting the curb, getting the slide. I do think Marc would have certainly got Ralph Fernandez. I don't know if he would have got Pedro Acosta, but I do think he would have got Ralph Fernandez and been third on the podium. It looked like he was managing the race a lot more than he wanted to at the start of the race, Marc. And then as soon as he got the slide, went over the curve, rear wheel destroyed, game over. But Digi Antonio, six, Digi's, we've spoken about it a couple of times now. I feel sorry for Digi because more often than not, he is in this position like the leading Ducati rider or the second or third best Ducati rider. But then his name's never mentioned kind of really in rides, big rides for next year and that. So, well done, Digi, especially after the sprint race disappointment that came with that. But to be the first Ducati, listen, 16.8 seconds off the Aprilia is a big gap. It just shows you the struggles that Ducati had that weekend. But well done to Digi. If you can't win it, be the first Ducati rider home, and that's what he did. Brad Binder in 7th. We've spoken about that. Franco Morbidelli in 8th. Pecco Bagnaia in 9th. For Morbidelli passing Bagnaia in the final turn across the line. Pecco's a weird one again, isn't it? All through our testing, looked better, looked like he was shaping things, molding things more to the way he liked it, looking more confident, and then just was in no man's land this weekend again. Didn't get into Q2, couldn't get into Q2, and just you kind of had to remind yourself Pecco was there. It was a disaster of a weekend for Pecco. If he has signed that Aprilia deal, which it looks like he is going to be Bezzecchi's teammate for next year, that is the best piece of business he could have done ever. I know there was talks of going to VR46. I think he needs to just get out of the Ducati mold. I see he came out today with the interview that he did on, is it Mino's podcast that he does, where he said, he carried the weight of the Rossi and Marc incident in when he went into Ducati, and he had an argument with Rossi about it, because I think it interferes with Pecco. I think it's something that Pecco carries on him, and he's been vocal about how he didn't like it, and they must just get on and move on and whatever. So Pecco's got demons he needs to fight in here. Pecco needs to sort this out. We know he's a 2-time MotoGP world champion. He's got the talent in that. He's just not in a comfortable place mentally. He's not comfortable in that factory Ducati team. So if we are going to see him in Aprilia, and Aprilia carry on with this trajectory the way they're going, yes, I know it's a new playing field next year with all the rule changes and that, but that could be a really good piece of business for Pecco Bagnaia. But he needs to find solutions now. He cannot carry on the way he carried on last year. He just can't. He's better than that. Luca Marini in 10th, the first of the Hondas. Again, Marini, not kind of like outstanding rider and the man making all headlines and that, but first Honda home, slowly going about his business, picking up points and being the man for Honda. So good job there from him. And listen, credit where credit's due. Jean Mir was up there and also had whatever failure he had. So it looked like it was going to be a good solid weekend from here. Again, just making the mistake in the sprint race. And still, Mia's been spoken about that factory Honda seat for next year, which is we'll talk right on market just now. Zarco in 11th. I think it's going to be a tough season for Zarco. Another year older in what is this grueling MotoGP. There's going to be race weekends where Zarco is going to be doing well. I mean this in the most respectful way possible. I'll be very surprised if Zarco gets a top 5 finish this year, to be honest. I know Honda's improving. They certainly have improved, and they will continue to improve. I don't want to say Zarco's past the sell-by date because he's finishing in 11th in MotoGP, 19 seconds behind. He's still got massive worth there. I just think how competitive that MotoGP is now, Zarco will do well to get a top 5 finish. So anyway, let's see. I could be horribly wrong, and if he does prove me wrong, I hope he does prove me wrong, then brilliant. But it's going to be a big challenge for Zarco this year. There's no doubt about it. Bastianini in 12th. We've spoken about KTM and especially Tech 3. Diego Moreira, the first of the rookies. We'll touch upon him now. Brilliant. I thought in that grueling MotoGP race, 13th, 24 seconds behind the overall winner, which was an exceptional Bezzecchi and Aprilia. I think Moreira can tap himself on the shoulder. I watched a lot of the coverage of him on the bike. He looks comfortable on the bike. He looks like a MotoGP rider. He looks in control. I like the Diego Moreira conversation. I think that's just going to elevate as we go round by round. He's going to go through the rookie kind of things where there's going to be crashes and mistakes and all those kind of things. But I think we're going to see a couple of races where we're going to see some good things from Moreira. So really impressed with him. Fabio Quartararo in 14th. Where do we start? Where do we start with Yamaha? Quartararo pulling the middle finger at his bike. It's a disaster. Yamaha, even in World Superbikes, Yamaha, I don't know what's going on. The new boss, the Italian guy, I forget his name, but he's come out and said, Japan are still fully support. There's still this disconnect between Japan and Europe. There's still too much confusion and there's not enough connection happening there. This new V4 is an absolute disaster. Yamaha's biggest challenge this year is going to be keeping Fabio Quartararo interested because he already looks uninterested to me. He's signed a big Honda deal. I think that's pretty much done. It's going to happen, and it's going to come out any day now. His mind's there. I think he's checked out of Yamaha. There's going to be races where he'll feel it and he'll feel comfortable and he'll put on a good show. But I think it's going to be a long, hard season for Yamaha and especially for Fabio Quartararo, because he's a championship contender and he's not going to be this year. He's not going to be at all this year. And he's going to have to deal with that. He's going to have to deal with the fact that you're a development rider. All the Yamaha's riders are going to have to deal with the fact that they are development riders and they've got to deal with that. So, and Quartararo is a very temperamental character. He is, he can be a kid in many. He's still a very young man. There's no doubt about that. But he can be very immature in mature moments, if you know what I mean. And his personal manager and Yamaha are going to have to manage it, because they can't have him pulling middle fingers to their bike every race weekend and hitting the tank and doing all kinds of things. It's not professional. It can't carry on that way. Wayne Taylor, I'm not a fan of Fabio. I'm afraid he is a crybaby that likes to throw his employers under the bus at any chance he gets. Okay, Wayne, I was trying to say it in a nice way, but you can say it the way you want. But I agree with you. I agree with you on that. And that's why I talk about the management side of, you've got to keep this guy under control. So much to the point that, even if you've got to do the media debriefs after every race, I understand that. But if I'm the media lady, I'm going to judge his character. I'm going to say, right, you're in no mental headspace to go talk to people and have a microphone in your face. It's literally going to have to be down to that kind of management. Let's just rather not have him say anything than what he wants to say, because I think he's going to be a very unscripted Fabio Quartararo this year in many ways. So it's going to be a big job. It's going to be a big job for them. See a couple of comments. Okay, Alex Rins in 15th. I think it's going to be a tough year for Rins. I think Rins is, at the coming to the end of his MotoGP career. I think, again, another rider that's going to battle for top 10s, top 5s. It's going to be the kind of rider you're going to forget about most weekends, which is sad to say, because obviously there's a talented rider there, but I've said it in many shows. It's damaged goods in many ways. I think too much has happened. You've got a damaged rider on a non-performing motorcycle. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. Maverick Vignales in 16. We touched upon him. Toprak Raj Galiardlu in 17th. Let's talk about Toprak, the other rookie. There was a comment here. I just want to pull up the Toprak comments. The Great Fight one. Toprak was actually quite good, considering it was his first race with not much knowledge of them tires. Not too far off Quartararo average race lap time in the full race. Olimoto. Toprak made a very solid start. It looked like he might be way off the pace, but was in the mix with the other Yamahas. With Quartararo mentally checking out, Toprak could quickly become their top man. So my sentiments exactly with Toprak. I was impressed with Toprak. It's a big change to come into MotoGP and the circus that is MotoGP. There's a lot more required of you as a rider, with press and the fans, and you're pulled in so many directions, and it's a grueling environment. And to go to a track that he's never been to before, first time racing there, still learning the tires, all the problems going on with Yamaha, the Yamaha not being anywhere near. So, he's not only trying to learn tires, he's trying to learn tires on an underperforming bike. He's trying to learn. There's all these things going on. And I said it a couple of weeks ago, Toprak's main aim this year should just be as close, if not the top Yamaha rider, as close to them as possible. And I watched him throughout the whole weekend in both the sprint and the main race. He was, as you guys have commented there, he was always within touching distance of the other Yamahas. Now, to be in touching distance of a Fabio Quartararo, even though he's mentally checked out, for Toprak to be close to him on the same motorcycle is a good benchmark and is a good outing. Yeah, I was impressed with Toprak. I do think there's going to be a lot more to come from Toprak. I think with his riding style, the way he's going to His racecraft has been good. The toughest challenge for Toprak this year and for Kenan Sofoglu is staying motivated. Like he's come out and he said it's not easy to see his name so far down and be battling so far down. This is a guy that's dominated World Superbikes for the last 5 years. So that's something he's going to have to get used to in this transition and handle that and be patient. None of these guys want to be patient. That's why Fabio Quartararo has checked out, because he's tired of being patient. He got paid all this money. Yeah, it's great that I got all that money, but I need results now, for his career and for his own mental health. But I was impressed. I really was impressed with Toprak, and I know the position, as the one comment said, the position doesn't quite reflect the big picture of how Toprak's weekend was. I think there's a rider there, and I think we're going to see a lot more of Toprak, and I think he is going to be Yamaha's leader in many ways in the not too distant future. So there we go. Ahead of Jack Miller. Jack Miller had big tire issues. We know that. Pirro stepping in for the injured Aldeguer in 19th. Mir, Alex Marquez, and Marc Marquez, the only non-finishers there. We've kind of touched upon them for now. So let me just catch up with some comments here. What's there, Paul Kruger? What's there, MSN? Hi, Robbie. Hope you well. There is some snow on that beard of yours. It's not. It's a tint. It's a tint. It's a life tint. No one can stay for long at Ducati factory team. Not a healthy environment to be in. I'm sorry for Bagnaia, but he will rise again outside that environment. Paul, fully agree with you on the Ducati environment. We know how harsh that environment can be. We've seen the likes of Lorenzo kind of battle in that environment. Pecco's now battled in that environment. It's a pressure cooking environment. I think Pedro Acosta is going to slot right in there. I think Ducati have made the perfect signing there. I think he's the perfect rider to come in there. He's mentally strong. He's just ridiculously talented. So, when Ducati lose Marc Marquez, I don't think they'll be too fussed. They've got Pedro Acosta coming, the next best thing, or the best thing at the moment. So, not too much to be worried about there. Johnny Martins, he has been warning that he will leave Yamaha for the last 2 years. Yeah, Johnny, he has. He signed that 4-year deal, big money, 12 million euros or 14 million euros, whatever it is. But that contract's up now. So he's given a lot to Yamaha, including a world title. But the time's there. When a rider does that kind of thing, it was the same with Mark at Honda. Throwing the middle finger. And that when a rider switches off, it's hard to go into race weekends, not believing. At this level, you can't. At this level, if you are not 100% mentally, physically, everything, trusting your environment, trusting the motorcycle underneath you, trusting yourself, you're going to finish 17th, 18th in this MotoGP, because the likes of Digi, who are at 100%, are finishing in 6th. That's how competitive this MotoGP field is. So it's, if you're at 99%, 98%, or God be it, if you're Fabio Quartararo and you're at 80%, you're just not going to be in the conversation. So it's going to be hard to see what's going to happen with Fabio and Yamaha this year, because I think we're going to see a lot more tantrums than we are going to see good results, to be honest. Okay, let's come into the rider market then. What we know, what we kind of know, and what we don't know. Factory Aprilia looks like it's definitely going to be Bezzecchi. We know he's married his motorcycle. We saw that already happen. And looks like it is definitely going to be Pecco Bagnaia. Pecco Bagnaia, who turned down a lot more money, from Monster Energy Yamaha to go to Aprilia, apparently, which I think is a smart move for Bagnaia. He needs to revive his career. He doesn't need more money in the bank for now. And that Aprilia could be that revival. You just look what that Aprilia has done to Bez. It's like that Grassini environment where they look, they cuddle their riders and they just let them go perform. That factory Ducati comes with a few headmasters in there, and it's like, you can't be doing that. You can't be doing that. You can't be doing that. So that's definitely going to Aprilia all Italian team. Yep, Grand Furrows. That's exactly what it's going to be. So I hope that does happen, because I want to see Pecco Bagnaia kind of shake this, what's going on with him. I want to see him shake it off, and I want to see a Pecco Bagnaia challenging up there. Aprilia have proved they've got the technology and the development to do it, because this year they're going to be good. They've proven it kind of already. Um, but next year's a clean slate, so there's a lot to come. But looks like that's what's going to be happening. Robert Mackey, heard Pecco getting a possible 4-year deal, or might that be 2 plus with extension? So I haven't heard the actual intricacies of the contract, to be honest, Robert. So that's good information that you've given there. If I'm a MotoGP team owner, I'm very hesitant on signing any rider for longer than a 2-year deal, to be honest. I like the idea of 2 years, and then if you're happy, we're happy, we extend for another 2 years. But there's a lot of talent coming through. There's a lot of talent. At Moto3, Moto2, there's a lot of riders coming through. There's a couple of aging riders in MotoGP. It's so fickle at the moment with everything. So yeah, I would say Pecco on at least a minimum 2-year deal. And Pecco would have had to make that decision. He would have had to weigh up big money, call it 10 million plus from Yamaha, compared to maybe 3-4 million from Aprilia. I would imagine it literally being that big of a difference, because Aprilia just don't have the kind of resources and financial power that Yamaha do. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, but I think it's going to be a great team. What the chances of finding another manufacturer to ride for? I don't know what you mean there, Kawasaki. Vince, what do you mean? What's the chances of finding another manufacturer to ride for? I don't know if there's any other manufacturers coming into the championship, if that's what you're talking about. I'm not too sure. Michelle Lewis, if MotoGP riders have the mindset of South Africa 60 checkers riders, it will be a crazy season. Can you imagine? Can you imagine letting loose checkers 60 riders on MotoGP bikes? Okay, Olimoto, Martin, Digi, Marini, Alonso, and Toprak all linked with the Monster Energy Yamaha seat. So Monster Energy Yamaha, it's going to be a clean slate. Rins and Fabio are going to be gone. From what I hear, Martin's already kind of the favorite for that. A massive money deal, kind of, again, 10 to 14 million over a couple of years kind of deal. Again, it's a decision Martin needs to make. Are you looking for results straight away, or are you looking for longevity in terms of financial gain? He's won a championship. Martin, in many ways, he needs to refine his career after last year and everything that's happened. Great way to start the season off this year. But it looks like, from what I hear, Martin and Marini are the favorites for that team. I like the idea of Marini because purely the same way that Honda hired him. We're not hiring Marini to go get wins and podiums and challenges for the championship. You're hiring Marini to make the project better, to make the bike better, to develop. And that's where Marini's worth is. We've seen, what he's brought to Honda. So that's where I can see that working is. Martin's the go for results man. Marini is the help develop the bike man. Depending on the season Toprak has, even if he is top Yamaha rider, I would refrain from going to factory Yamaha if I was in, to be honest. I know there's the money and the glory of being the factory rider. He's essentially a factory rider in the Pramac team now. I would stay there, obviously carry on the relationship with Red Bull. It's still very much going to be Monster Energy Yamaha. On that topic, it does look like Red Bull will be sponsoring Ducati from next year onwards, which makes sense again with Pedro Acosta and Marc Marquez. Again, not running any Monster Energy branding on his helmet or anything this season, Marc Marquez. That kind of is an indication that, right, just hang off another year. Red Bull is coming and you can go back to being Red Bull. Pedro Acosta is very much a Red Bull man as well. So that looks like that's going to happen for next year onwards. Red Bull as a Ducati sponsor. They sponsor the motocross team as well. So there's already that tie-in. So that looks like that's going to happen. Martin is a Red Bull athlete at the moment, so going to Monster Energy Yamaha could be a change, but we've seen it in the past with riders making that change. Digi is one I haven't heard of, Olimoto, so thanks for bringing that up. Digi, again, he's just that piece of the puzzle that just seems to be left on the side there. Like, okay, let's just wait for all these other pieces, and then, if there's no one else, we'll take Digi. Which is a pity because he's proved his worth. He's a really good rider, and he proved it again this weekend. Top Ducati man in 6th place there. So let's wait and see. Alonso, I know they would probably want him, but I think the reality of Alonso is he will go to Ducati, will sign him. So it'll be like an Aldeguer kind of situation where they'll sign him on a Ducati contract, but they'll place him in the Cressini team. Ducati's biggest problem now is spaces. You know, a couple of years ago, they had the Pramac team, they had the Cressini team, they had the factory team. So they had 6 places they could put riders. Now they essentially have 4. So if Alex Marquez, which we'll talk about, doesn't leave, you know, that leaves them with a problem. And I think they would be happy to let Alex Marquez go to bring in the likes of David Alonso. So I think Alonso is going to go there. So yeah, factory Aprilia, factory Aprilia is Bez and Bagnaia. Factory Yamaha, I can see as Martin and Marini. Is how I see it. Factory Ducati, I see as Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta. Although Marc Marquez could be a question mark if he wraps up the title this year. I could see him. I could see him leaving, and then potentially Bulliga. You know, this is the sad thing with Digia. I think Bulliga would probably get the call ahead of Digia. But I would say Digia or Bulliga for the factory Ducati, the second factory Ducati seat, if Marc doesn't sign on. Robert Swat. But the thing is, Rob, the Aprilia might not even be that good next year. Then he has dropped the ball, at least having a good payday. That's with Pecco Bagnaia. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen next year, but I think a lot of what the current teams have does fit into, you know, what's happening next year. A lot of that, you know, the Aprilia DNA, the Ducati DNA, you know, these European engineers just know how to make motorcycles go faster around a racetrack. So I think they'll be absolutely fine next year. I think Aprilia will have a good bike. I think it'll be very much of the same in many ways, maybe with like KTM being a bit better or Honda being a bit better. But I still think even with the rule changes next year, Aprilia and Ducati are going to be the benchmark, to be honest. Having a look at factory KTM, I think sadly is going to be Maverick Vinales. And the second rider in that team is a big question mark to me. I don't know. Alex, what I say, I don't know. I'm lying to you. Alex Marquez will be the second rider. So it's going to be Alex Marquez and Maverick Vinales. Alex Marquez, it's a big money deal. It's literally, I think, KTM just throwing the checkbook at him. Realistically, the only rider they can get, I think, as I said, Ducati are kind of saying to Alex, you know, we kind of need you out the door because we need Alonso. So you're more than welcome to go to Tech 3. So I think you can go to factory KTM, sorry. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be Vinales and Alex Marquez factory KTM and Brad and Danny Holgado Tech 3. Team there. Vince Ramsey, sorry, Rob, meant Brad finding another manufacturer to ride for. Any chance? Vince, I don't think so. Honestly, I know there have been a couple of murmurs that Brad could maybe go to Pramac Yamaha, which, again, never say never in MotoGP, but I see Brad staying with KTM. I see him plugging into the Tech 3. I think, as someone mentioned earlier, Gunther Steiner would want that stability of a rider that knows the environment, that knows the company, that knows the bike, that knows the team, that knows the DNA, that knows all of that. That could be a mentor in many ways to Daniel Holgado. So I think that's pretty much played out. It's crazy to think that Alex Marquez will be giving up a Ducati ride for a KTM. But again, I think I think the decision has maybe been taken away from Alex Marquez because there will be no Ducati seat available for him. So he's going for the money. But I think it's very much a case of Ducati looking to the future, and Ducati are ruthless when it comes to signings. We've seen that. They're quite happy to make these decisions. So I see that playing out in that way. The VR46 Ducati team is a bit of a head scratcher. Digi maybe staying. Bulliga potentially going in there. Pecco Bagnaia could still potentially go in there, although I don't think so. I think realistically for VR46, the options are probably maybe Firmin Aldeguer. You know, there has been talk about him in the past. Maybe he could go there, although I think he would quite happily stay Grassini, or he could actually be the rider to replace Marc if Marc doesn't stay another year in the factory Ducati team. So VR46, I think their potential lineup at the moment is between Morbidelli, although I don't know, I think his time might be up unless he has a banger of a season. Digi could be another safe bet if they don't find anyone else. I think Bulliger could be making the move, and they've got Celestino Vietti in Moto 2 that they could give a ride to. We saw him test the MotoGP bike at the end of last year. He could be another option. So that's still one of the teams that are very much up in the air. The teams that I've mentioned are pretty solid predictions as it stands at the moment. Factory Honda, Pedro Acosta, not Pedro Acosta, sorry. Can't say that. Fabio Quartararo, I think, is a definite there at the moment. And then Joan Mir is the second name that I've heard. But it could still be Luca Marini, depending on results. So I don't think that second ride is finalized as yet. Diego Moreira could have a fantastic season and find himself in there. So the Honda one's still a bit up in the clouds, but I think certainly Fabio Quartararo will be a Honda rider next year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Grant Farrows Martin put his name in at the Prima Pramac team last weekend. So yeah, Martin is also an option because I think Jack might be gone, and then there's obviously the two factory spots. So if Top Break goes up, yeah, Martin knows the team, knows the environment, thrived there, loves it. He could potentially go there and he could run the Red Bull branding, or he could go to the factory team. Pramac Yamaha also talking about the likes of Manu Gonzalez, Barry Baltus has been mentioned there as well. A couple of riders coming up from Moto 2. So yeah, again, Pramac's another one where you kind of don't really know. I think the Aprilia factory team, the Ducati factory team, the KTM factory team, and Tech 3 KTM, I'm pretty confident in those predictions that we've made there. The rest are all kind of just still maybes and all kind of things. What was the other one? Who haven't we mentioned? Trackhouse. I think Raul Fernandez probably could stay there. I know Raul has been also spoken about going to the factory team alongside Bezzecchi. Surely Aprilia can't take a Raul Fernandez over a Pecco Bagnaia, even though Raul Fernandez has been the better rider over the last couple of races, especially. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see what kind of season Raul Fernandez has. He's got off to a great start, but it's a long, hard season. So let's see how that plays out. Bullier getting a factory Ducati would be a huge call. Surely his best chance is VR46. I agree with that. There's talk David Alonso is asking for too much money and Ducati don't want to pay him what he is looking for. Could that see KTM move in for him? Good information there. Thanks, Olimoto, for that. Could be. It also depends what happens with Alonso. Like I said earlier, he strikes me as that very unlucky rider that's just always plagued by these big crashes. That's something you got to take into this weekend again. He just a massive crash, where he got hit by two other riders. It's just like trouble seems to follow him wherever he goes. And we know the talent that he is, Moto 3 world champion, but in Moto 2, he's shown pace and then he's just been hampered by these massive crashes. And this is the problem MotoGP teams have, is that there's this pool, a big pool of riders to choose from. Even with the likes of Rins going out and Bastianini potentially going out and Digi and Morbidelli, there's still this big pool of riders, the Bulligers, the David Alonso's, the Barry Baltus, Celestino Vietti, Manu Gonzalez, Danny Holgado. There's still a big pool of riders to choose from. So a lot to contemplate and a lot of decisions to be made. Jack Miller may well be saved in 2027 by Liberty wanting an Aussie rider to help them promote the GP. It's a very good point there, Olimoto. Or, as I said, Jack's got that marketing factor. Again, this weekend did nothing on track, but we all loved him for what he did with Top Rack in the Tuk Tuk race. So kept himself relevant. Kept himself in the shop window and relevant, which is what you need to do. Trackhouse, I think it's a tough one because, even if Ayagura and Raul Fernandez have great seasons, I still think, the Pecco Bagnaias, they're going to be overlooked for the Pecco Bagnaias and those kind of. There's only one other factory Aprilia seat remaining there. But again, Trackhouse have proved a good competitive environment. So, if you can win a race there, which Raul did, and get podiums and compete like he is, I know everyone wants that the status of being in the factory team and the factory, but if you're happy where you are, look at Bastianini. Bastianini's career was thriving at Cressini Ducati as a satellite rider. And since he turned into a factory Ducati rider and now a factory KTM rider, it's kind of gone downhill. So riders have to take that into consideration. Yes, Robert Swat, these are my son's headphones. I stole them because he was busy playing Fortnite with his China. Yeah. And they get very animated. So I was like, well, I can't have him screaming in the background. So yeah, I tried this. I just don't look like a gamer, do I? Just don't fit the bill. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much where it leaves it. Obviously, LCR Honda is another one. Has Zarco signed a 2-year deal? Someone in the comments, has he signed a 2-year deal? I don't know, but you could possibly see Zarco staying and Moreira staying in that team if the factory team go with Fabio Quartararo and either Mir or Marini. Where does Mir go if he does get overlooked by factory Honda, and if he doesn't have a great season and he has another crash fest of a season, where does Mir go? I can't see many spaces available for him in the MotoGP paddock. Could he be an outsider for one of the KTM spots, or where does he go? So let's see. Zarco has a 1-year deal for next year, I believe. Wayne Taylor, thank you. That yes, Zarco 2-year deal is correct. Grant Farrows. Zarco has a deal for 2027. So Zarco will definitely be there, and I think Moreira. So I think that'll stay. Unless Moreira has a cracking season, they move Moreira up to the factory team and maybe Mir down to the LCR team. But I think the biggest change for Honda will be Fabio Quartararo coming in there. So yeah, anyway, it's crazy how, this is the first season in history that I've ever seen where the rider market's been this this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, this active so early on in the season. Even Gunther Steiner said, he's amazed how quickly the rider market is like evolving. He's just been put into MotoGP, and now it's like, okay, apart from the race team and what's happening on track, and that we've got to deal with riders and who gets who, and it's becoming a money game now as well. So yeah, DG, Mr. Bastianini, Morbidelli, Binder, Marini runs. The music will stop and someone won't have a seat. Olimoto. Yeah, I do. As hard as it is to say with that Binder name there, I do think those are the riders, kind of, as I said, with those pieces of the puzzle that you have on the side going. Although out of those names, Brad is probably the most solid I know of that will be in the paddock next year. Heard there's a MotoGP rider in negotiations with Aruba, Ducati, and World Superbike. Kevin Free. Yes, there is, and my money is on Bastianini. Something tells me Jack Miller potentially. Digi possibly, and Morbidelli possibly. So there's a couple of options there. In World Superbikes, if Bulliga does leave and if Lackawanna doesn't pull his socks up in World Superbikes on the Ducati, there could be 2 factory Ducati seats open in World Superbikes where, a Bastianini and a Morbidelli could go, or a Morbidelli and Digi could go, or, so there could be 2 spots there. But the only real rider that can make the move from World Superbikes to MotoGP is Bulliga. And as Olimoto mentioned earlier, I probably see him going into VR46, to be honest. I know he was previously a VR46 Academy rider. He left the VR46 Academy. I don't know what the relationship still is like there, but he's going to dominate World Superbikes this year. There's no doubt about that, and he'll earn his ride in MotoGP. So, and again, as I said, Ducati are running out of seats, so that's potentially the only option he has. All that training from Vinales, and he's still fumbled. Yep, GFP Superbike sales. I mentioned it earlier. Maverick Vinales knows what to do on a bike. He knows how to go fast on a motorcycle. He doesn't know how to control his head when things aren't going his way. He doesn't know how to stay calm and react and control situations. He just doesn't. That's where Jorge Lorenzo is going to earn his money. And can you imagine how much money? I mean, Maverick Vinales must be throwing his entire salary to having Lorenzo there. Lorenzo does not come at cheap. Lorenzo doesn't fly, cattle class. He flies first class to all the races. And, so that's a big expense. That's a big commitment that Vinales has made. And, you know, it's all nice and easy when you're on the track, the go-kart track, and things are going well and you're setting fast lap times and yay. After a weekend like this, there's got to be head bashing between the two of them. I think Lorenzo calls a spade a spade. I think he'll be going to Vinales and saying, no, that's not good enough. Look what Acosta's doing. And I actually read a piece that one of my Spanish mates sent to me that's close to Lorenzo, where he said Lorenzo was challenging Vinales and saying, here's the data. I've broken down the data. Pedro's doing this, and he's sitting like this on the bike, and he's doing this on the bike with the front end. You're complaining about the front end because you're doing this and your body positions. So, Lorenzo's not just standing in the corner there going, yeah, I'm just taking the money. He's very actively involved. And Gunther Steiner and the Tech 3 team, I think as the season goes on, they are going to lean on him, to kind of pick apart the data and really analyze things. It could be a hindrance, he could be getting away, or it could pan out for them. But I could definitely see a Lorenzo in that paddock, in that pit box this weekend, saying to Vinales, no, that's not good enough, man. You can't, this is not what you do to be a champion. I'm a 5-time world champion. I know what it is. You've got to break it down. You've got to do this. You've got to sort this out. So yeah, let's see how that exercise plays out, but certainly a lot to do there. Bulligo races in the 100 km at the ranch, so I don't think Rossi is against the guy. Yeah, good point. I don't think there's anything malice there at all. Johan Brits, Rob, can we watch Moto America for Darren Binder in the UK? Johan Brits, yes, you can. Go onto YouTube, Moto America. Just follow them on YouTube. They show all the races live, first of all, which is great. Obviously, the timing's not good. It's like early in the morning because of the time difference. But their highlights packages are good. They always have the full races available on their channel. So, yeah, just go follow Moto America on YouTube, and we'll definitely watch Darren, Matthew Skoltz, Cam Peterson, and Dominic Doyle in action in Moto America. There we go. Ollie Moto America's on YouTube. If Brad beats Vinales properly every round this season, might force KTM's hand. Grant Forrest, it might, although I think that decision has already been made. Let's not forget Lorenzo at Honda and Ducati, not to take away from his championship. Yeah, Bugs, I agree with you. I think at Ducati, he was getting things right, and I think Ducati made the decision too early to get rid of him. I think he would have been a world champion on Ducati. At the Honda was a retirement village for him. He went there, took money, and it was also the start of Honda's downward spiral. So, but I think Lorenzo's had a couple of seasons away from it. I think he's had time to really reflect on his career himself. I think he's one of these late bloomers when it comes to maturity, as Maverick Vinales might be. But I think Lorenzo's got a lot to offer, and I think certainly from the outside, I was one of those riders that I could always give the best advice and be a better person from the outside than I was on track. I could never put into action the things I knew I had to do, but I couldn't. Whereas Lorenzo had the best of both. I think he did it on he did do it on track. He proved that, and I think he's going to be a huge asset in that role, as long as he's honest, as long as he's and Vinales can take it. No one, especially at that level, likes criticism, but there has to be criticism. Lorenzo's going to have to sit Vinales down and say, listen, forget that you can ride a motorbike, but if you don't sort this out, you're not going to go anywhere. And you've got to be able to take criticism. It's not the bike. Pedro Costa proved it's not the bike. It's you. You can look in the mirror and take the responsibility. You've got to change something. And that's where I like Brad's comments. He said, good, solid start to the weekend. Great. We've got to improve. But Pedro has proved that the bike, the potential and the level of the bike. So that means, I've got to make it better. We have to make it better because Pedro's proved where it is. So it is. And that's going to be Maverick's biggest challenge this year. There's no doubt about that. So, So let's see. Olimoto, MotoGP's contract with Mugello expires this season. Can you imagine if they let that track go as well? Who wants to see it replaced with a Saudi Arabian or Bahrain round? Nobody. Olimoto, it is a concern. I remember a few years back when I was lucky enough to go to the Mugello MotoGP round, but it was, in the COVID years, and Rossi had just left, and it was that year where they had like 17,000 spectators over the weekend. And already then Mugello were like, they've got to front up like 50, 60 million euro to have that round. When you're attracting 17,000 spectators, it doesn't exactly help the Bulls, So I think Mugello's been a fragile conversation for the last couple of years. Thankfully, it's picked up recently, with a big attendance and that. But this is what all the tracks and that have to, and this is where the Phillip Island thing I think came in. FIM went to Phillip Island and said, right, you've got to step up hospitality. They want to make it a show. They want the F1 street track style of the big buildings with lights and big hospitalities. And like the Sepangs have got these big fancy hospitalities, and they want to wine and dine people and big sponsors. And Phillip Island doesn't have that. Phillip Island doesn't have the that aura, that high class feel. Mugello, in a way, also doesn't have it. Mugello's an old school track, nice pit facility and that, but it's not the glitz and the glamour, I think, that MotoGP and Liberty want. And that's my biggest concern, and that's why people talk about Kyalami. Kyalami's actually got a little bit of that. Very nice facilities, nice glass buildings and rooms, locations not too bad. It's in a good part of South Africa, although the residents, will have their say around there. But it's this fronting 50, 60 million euros, which in South African rands is just massive amounts. And you don't get it back. You get majority of it back through TV rights and spectators through the door, and vendors selling hot dogs and beers at quadruple the prices and stuff. You make a loss. It's just the prestige of having the racing, and the tourism and that it brings in to the city and the nearby cities. That's really where the advantage and the gain is of having it. So, but I agree with you, Olimoto. It is concerning. As Silverstone has got the facilities for lots of fans and VIPs, Donington does not. So it doesn't look like a lot of British fans will get what they want. No, exactly. I think Liberty look at Donington and Silverstone and go, we're going to Silverstone all day because we can wine and dine people there. It's as simple as that. It's becoming, it's always been a show, but Liberty are going to make it more of a show. They want glitz and glamour. They're going to have fireworks. They want lit up buildings. They want, caviar and champagne. They don't want Red Bulls and Red Bulls and crisps. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But it's going to be an exciting season. I think there's going to be a lot more conversations of decisions made on and off track, and we're going to be tested in many ways in our love for the sport. But I think our love for the sport will always come through. But let's hope that they don't test us too much. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for a great show. Thank you for being my co-hosts. I couldn't have done this without you. It is harder without Paul. I must be honest. I love having Paul alongside me and all the knowledge and stuff that he brings to it. But we'll have him back for the next show after the Brazil round. Wayne and everyone else, I promise you, I'll continue to work on getting not only Brad but Darren, Riche. It's just about lining up schedules. That's really what it boils down to. So, but anyway, yeah, great conversation, great open conversation. There's no wrong and right in our discussions. It's just a great community of fans that love to watch the sport that we love so much. So, really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking out the time to join me. And until next time, be safe, be happy, be healthy. Yeah, thank you all very much. Cheers.